Action.
Frankie, welcome back to the car. It's been 2 long years.
Oh, Nancy, thanks for having me back in the car.
This is great. It's so nice to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, absolutely.
I thought we'd drive around a little bit, and if you have any questions, maybe chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have a question, in fact.
What would that question be, Frankie?
Well, I was thinking, what are your thoughts on the market, Nancy?
The market. Well, I think I'm in a good position to talk about it a little bit. I've recently had some new listings, which are always a good barometer of what's going on. But Frankie, as we hit October and we're deeply entrenched in the fall market, I'm going to say this is a big inflection moment. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. And while still very vibrant, I think a key point, a key seller's takeaway would be you have to price your house correctly. And it doesn't matter really what price point it's in. It has to really correlate with what that pricing should be. And it doesn't matter if the house is all done or it needs some work. It has to make sense to the buyer. Because understand, your buyers are coming from Brooklyn, they're coming from the city, and there's still more of a value up here than there would be down there. And there's still a lot of buyers, although obviously there's less than there was, during the peak part of COVID. But people were always scheduled to come up into this area, so we still have a big buyer pool, although obviously less people are qualifying now. And if you are that buyer, you may be getting a little better deal than you might have gotten a couple of years ago, but still you're not necessarily in that true power position. And I think it's important. You have to buy a house when you have to buy a house, and so there's been some kind of flip commentary. You marry the house, you date the rate. You would hope that rate would come down at some point, but everyone has to move. So at a certain point, it's just going to make sense. And to that point about houses and inventory, I have to say, in this past week, I've been pretty wrapped up with some multiple bids on some properties, and I'll tell you two very different situations. One, a house in the mid-9s that needed some updates, but on a good solid block, a really coveted location, and that certainly had multiple bids, and went well over asking. Then something I have in the mid-8s that had actually been on the market for a while, and that's an interesting point. Some of the listings that had come out, let's say midsummer, and didn't fly out the door, they stalled for a little while, but I think they're back into play. And that one
really
also, yeah, that one also, all of a sudden, it got a lot of activity and also multiple offers, and we should be going under contract with that, as well as another listing at $399. Now I know you're an expert. I mean, Frankie.
$399. That's gonna fly.
That right, and that's your educated price point right there. And yes, we are getting a lot of activity. There's an offer on the table, and I think that's going to have a very, very nice outcome. So if you're out there and you're hunting for a house, understand there's never going to be a lot of inventory, but it's certainly worthwhile coming up out of the city to check out what's here. And if you're a seller, there's no particular reason to wait. Put it out there, but let's get savvy with the pricing. Take off those rose-colored glasses. Just because your neighbor got 650 does not mean you're going to get 7 in this market here. I've worked through many markets, and it's still vibrant and it's still good. And Nyack is a wonderful place to live, as is Piermont, Grandview, the river towns. So, we hope to see you up here. And we'll get back in the car in about a month and recap what's going on with the fall.
Oh, sounds good, Nancy.
Right. Thanks, Frankie.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Cut.